Already starting with tech issues. There was already a question also. What was that?
How long have you been turning?
So I've had a lathe about 5 years, but I really got into it maybe about 2 years ago. Yeah, ooh, it's already been 2 years. I remember it feels like last year, it was just 1 year ago.
Give me a long day.
Oh yeah. So I do kind of want to start out just holding bowl gouge at a lathe. I don't know if I'm the only one who does this, but I feel like I'm not. Does anybody else just go out to the shop, not to turn or anything, but just to stand there, just to be around your tools, seeing some nodding, I'm seeing some, yeah. It's peaceful, it's tranquil, it's, you know, it's a good calming feeling. And I used to think, so, all the fun philosophical history lesson can be done with, because starting out, I've seen a lot of people start out with a faceplate. This is kind of flat. It's just got Greenwood sealer on it. It's got a whole bunch of spalting to it, which is going to be hopefully really pretty. I'll move in just a second. So what I've seen people do is cut it out with a Forstner bit, which is usually fine. I actually try to avoid that. The point that a Forstner bit leaves can end up being something that guides it into a shape that you don't want. Actually, that's not going to work at all. So instead, I'm just going to hit it with a chisel. I've marked out roughly where the center is, and I'm going to go in just a couple of hits. What I'm going to try to do is wedge out the bark, giving me a little space. Just a little, I mean, square, doesn't really matter. This is going to take forever. So instead, I'm going to grab whatever this tool is called. I've heard, I call it the wiggle wiggle tool. I don't know, I think the real name is like the oscillating multi-headed tool. Rolls off the tongue. But using the wherever I marked out with the chisel, and you're going to hear me say this a lot today, but as I'm doing this, I'm pushing directly into the wood. Even as I'm trying to hollow this out, clear out a flat spot. I'm just going to keep going with, because there's a second one already ready to go. This is the other half of the log. But what I'm left with is just a flat spot. There are no defining points or anything, because the way that I cut this up, I'm assuming, actually that would be a good question. Who's never turned live edge, natural edge, anything like that? Okay, a couple people. Who's turned one but it didn't really work out? Because that one's me. So the main thing is keeping the bark on. And so to be able to do that, I'm assuming that this is going to be cut off of a chainsaw rather than a bandsaw. If you've ever used a chainsaw and you've actually accidentally hit dirt, immediately that chainsaw is dull. So the same can generally work for gouges and stuff for the bark. So by coming right off the chainsaw, this ends up being the most efficient way, because then you don't have to sharpen a bandsaw blade. You don't have to sharpen a Forstner bit, which I've never been able to do well. So it leaves you with a flat spot to mount here, and there is roughly a flat spot. I'm actually going to mark a little bit deeper.
What kind of wood is that?
This is Bradford pear. This is something that I have been kind of waiting to turn because I really liked how the grain was, and then all of a sudden it spalted, which I'm taking the opportunity now to brag. I grew the spalting myself. All you do is forget that you have it for about 6 to 9 months, and it gets some dirt and mud on it. Boom, you've grown your own. I'm gonna start off with it at its most versatile with having it between centers. And I'm lining it up now with where I cut it before. Really doesn't matter, it's not gonna change much. And then I'm actually gonna start with, once I get the,
Clayton, are you starting with the back side, which would be the open end of the bowl flat? Is that where you're trying to make that part?
I am. Okay. So this actually is, so much of what I'm gonna do today is backwards from what you would expect it would be. And so quite literally, I'm starting with it backwards. Most people will put the side with the bark towards the headstock, but I cut this off of a chainsaw. I cut it just into an octagon with some corners. I don't know how high I'm gonna be. So I don't know what I'm working with yet. This is, as far as I can tell, and this is Lyle Jameson, I think, has this as one of his techniques, is you take it straight off the chainsaw. He actually has just an electric one that he keeps by the lathe, and whenever he mounts it for a hollow form, bark or not, he'll actually just cut it into an octagon at that point, because this is where the bowl's gonna get smaller. The bowl's gonna get into probably about here. It's not gonna be bigger than this. It's gonna be so maybe 6, 7 inch bowl at most. Right now, all I want to do is just maximize however much I'm going to be able to get out of it. So by coming here, I can see that I'm going to be good here, and this is about where it is. And so I'm going to start off just by rounding it off. I'm going to start with speed at 0. I'm going to hope that it's on fast. And I'm just going to get started. There's probably a lot of details that I'm missing, so if anybody has any questions, I am gonna say I've never used this bowl gouge before. This Grizzly's having a sale for the next 2 days. This is a $5 bowl gouge. Yeah. So it's got an asymmetric grind on it. If we can do the, yeah. So on the left side, it's got an Ellsworth grind. On the right side, it's got more of a traditional shear grind, kind of like what you would see Richard Graffin do. I call it the Welsh grind because it's Irish grind on one side, English grind on the other, and Welsh seems like right in the middle. I don't know. So, you know, there's nothing like in the middle of a live demo to see how I like this tool. So I'm gonna figure that out. As long as I'm not feedbacking too much. Is that gonna be bad? I'll try to make sure I lift it up before I talk. Except then. Oh. I've had a lathe walk across the shop. I've never had it roll across the shop. Okay, so right now, all I'm going to do is just get it into a circle. There is bark still here and here at the edges. I just want it to, I'll know I'm ready for the next step when I get it about an inch up. It really doesn't matter how far. You just don't want it touching this rim. beauty of having a stab center is that it'll slow down on you if you're not fully just driven into the wood. Okay, so a couple points. That I have my shoulder here. I guess technically whenever I actually start to round it out, I'm going to start switching to turning left hand. You really don't have to, but for me, what I've found is I've turned tons of bowls. I've never turned this one. I have no idea what's going to go on. There may be bugs on the inside, and I'm going to squeal a little bit whenever it hits, and hopefully Gerald will edit that out of the video. But right now, if I start turning left-handed, it's going to keep me out of the line of fire in case any of the bark wants to come off. I mean, Bradford pear, cherry, any kind of the fruit trees are going to generally have the bark stay on. But just in case, it gives me a preview of how it's going to handle. All of this first step is just introducing the tool to the wood and introducing yourself to the wood. And it's just a bunch of handshakes all over the place. So AAW rules say that I have to stop the lathe every single time whenever I try to move the tool rest. This is one of those times where that is a very good suggestion. You have one little, the banjo slid just a little bit, and the tool rest hits, you lose all the bark, you lose the ability to actually have a live edge bolt. To the point where it's decently round now. Just have bark here and a little bit of bark here. It is uneven. That's fine. I don't mind that at all for this stage. So I'm good up here with having the bark raise up a little bit, but not quite here. So I'm just going to keep going with it. Question? Yes.
I would have thought, I'm sure it's going to be, I would have thought that, and again, because I'm ignorant of it, you're using a bowl gouge throughout. And I would have thought, again, that you'd grab a big roughing gouge and hog off the sides. But are you doing that for finesse, so you can finesse what you're doing? Is that what you're
not
saying?
at all. This is, so for the same reason, I don't have the sharpener out. I actually have a 5/8 gouge that I'm probably going to switch to. This was $5. This is going to go through all the bark and get dull and get used up, and I don't mind it. And then I'm going to switch to the better steel for finish cuts.
Oh, that was the reason for the $5 too. I thought you were selling them or something. Okay, I'm with you.
Hearing it, just to never use a spindle rough and gouge on a bowl. A spindle rough and gouge isn't made for that. It's got a tang that will snap off, and the bowl gouge is the best way to get to a better relationship with the bowl. A spindle rough and gouge is the best way to get to a better relationship with your insurance adjuster for your health insurance.
Appreciate it, thanks.
Yep.
A roughing gouge is really, I don't know that there's a bowl roughing gouge or a spindle roughing gouge. It's one basically, and you don't use a roughing gouge on a bowl. like you said, the tang is very thin. And I did not know that when I started turning, and they're very dangerous. You can bend or you can break the tang. So the bowl gouge is really the way to start roughing a bowl out.
Not only that, the spindle roughing gouge has a really wide amount of metal, and when you engage it, you're engaging a lot of metal into that wood, and therefore it's really easy to get that catch he's talking about because of all that metal that's in the wood.
And the end grain also, everybody probably knows this, but you're hitting end grain half the time and long grain half the time. So when you hit the end grain, it's a lot more pressure on that gouge, on that tang.
That's one of the important things. The other one, so with the bowl gouge, if I'm just going to guess overhead camera would work.
That was a good question about that.
It is. It always is, because for so long I didn't know why. And then once I started to understand it, I just, I took it on faith, and then it became very important after, I understood all that went into it. So, okay, I'm doing this on camera as best I can. If you notice, this is a parabolic flute. Whenever you start cutting, there is all this steel underneath it. It's rounded out so that there is actually a much larger amount of steel under it, as opposed to let's do this spindle gouge for reference. So with I'm gonna try to do this, and this is not gonna work. Okay. So the difference between the two, really simply, is with a spindle gouge, as you're cutting on this wing, you're cutting on just this razor thin tip, and you don't have the rest of the steel backing it up. That's how you overcome the fact that you're turning side grain and then end grain and then side grain and then end grain, and it keeps the tool from bouncing. The other thing is whenever you have a bowl gouge that has corners. This one is swept back to another Ellsworth grind. This one has more of the Irish grind. If you get one of these corners in there, that is I don't have a technical name for the kind of catch that it is. I call it the pants changer, for reasons. Okay, but it is a good idea. Thinking about it, I don't know how I feel about that. But I'm going to switch to this 5/8 bowl gouge. It's also just regular high-speed steel, so I'll be able to cut through it, and I'll be able to hog out a little bit more. But even then, I'm still going to be doing push cuts all the way through. I think I've said it once. I should have said it 18 times by now. Everything to keep the bark on means you're doing push cuts. If you notice, I'm getting a whole lot of tear out because I'm pushing technically what is downhill. Whenever you have a bowl and you want a clean cut on it, you always end up doing the base to the rim. This is the opposite. This is why you get to, with a live edge bowl, you're supposed to turn it wrong. That's why all the measurements, all the details, all the machining stuff goes out the window. You just get to figure out what's going to look good. You get to feel like you're actually working the wood rather than just machining it, just doing a CNC and hitting a button and walking away. Absolutely merits to that, but there is something primal that it connects you, it grounds you. It's got a history to being able to work the wood. I almost said feral. That is not the word that I meant. So I'm gonna finish roughing this out. I'm gonna take out this little void here where I guess there used to be a bug that lived there. And then we'll get started on the next step. Okay, that is enough to work with. Okay, so this is step one, the introduction. I'm gonna bring the lathe speed down to 0, just as a habit. And from here, now I know basically what I'm working with, how much of a bowl I can actually have out of this. It's trued up to how it was, but it's not balanced. So by remounting it roughly where the original points were, just reversed, I get something that almost looks like it once was round. So then the question becomes, because I just said it was trued up, but it wasn't balanced. The question now becomes, how do we get it balanced? And that, we have to use math. I hate it when I have to use math. But it's simple math. It's 1 is 1 and 2 is 2. Which sounds like math to me. And to keep from marking up this really nice tool rest, I'm just gonna use some tape. So I don't know if overhead camera is gonna be able to get it just right. So I'm gonna have this out for a minute. Yeah. And should have had this out before. Well, all the things. Okay. So right now on the blank we have 4 spots. We have a high spot. I'm just gonna call it A. If I can write. And then we have a second high spot. This, also A. This is gonna be one of the lower spots. This is what we were getting to whenever we were first roughing it out. It's gonna be B. And on the other side, it's gonna be C. No, it's gonna be B. So as long as A and A are balanced, B and B are balanced, that's the whole thing. That's this secret trick to making a live edge bowl. You can end up with incredibly balanced, like in this piece where I can shift it just a little bit and the 4 points should all line up. You get a really level bowl that way. In my mini gallery over there, there's one that is on like a little pedestal stand. It actually has 3 points higher and then 1 point is lower, and it almost forms like a box canyon kind of thing. And I put a finial inside it that you really can't see unless you're looking at it from the front. So once you start, so it's round, that's your basic thing. That's how you prepare to start turning this. And then from there, that's when you get to have fun with it. That's when you get to feel like whatever I'm doing, it's what the wood was, it's how it wants to be cut. It's how it wants to be shaped. And this is yet again working with the wood rather than just working the wood. For this one, I want to keep it completely simple. I have gone not simple in a lot of different areas, but it's going to be easiest to illustrate the point if I just show there's a high spot right here. There is a low spot along this line. The highest spot is along here, and the lowest spot is right there. And on the tool rest, I'm just going to make a mark. This is why I put the tape down, so I didn't Sharpie all over somebody else's tool rest. And right now, I'm going to do the best I can to point this. Right now, this line is pointing directly at A. And if I rotate this, hey, that's actually pretty close. This is where I am. I feel like I could have a, yeah, this will work a little bit better. So where I ended up with this one is right about here, maybe 1/8 of an inch off from where I want to be. This gets loosened, and I move it 1/16 of an inch. it really doesn't require much. So that when this moves back a 16th, this will actually move forward a 16th because I'm rotating the entire piece. So 16th plus 16th, again, I don't like to do math, but I'm pretty sure that's 1/8. So as I'm doing this now, I'm going to have same Sharpie point, but this is going to be off now because I moved both of them. I'm going to reevaluate, I'm going to readjust. So now this one is pointing directly at the Sharpie line. This is going to rotate around, and now it's pointing directly on the Sharpie line. The A points, the high points are balanced. From there, you can continue, you can do whatever you want. This side is going to be lower than this side, so you'll end up with, I have a piece that I did as a practice where it kind of opens in, and it's a slow sweeping curve, and it gives it a definite front side. For this one, I'm going to balance both of them because it's a really good practice before you get, all exploratory with it, to be able to see what it looks like when it's completely balanced, because having it be balanced is, well, I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to line up again the Sharpie point, and B is right there on the Sharpie line. I'm going to rotate it, and I am way off on this one. So I'm going to move it about half the distance. It's going to drop down. And there may be a chance I overshot it just a little bit. So from here, this side needs to come back up, or come up just a little bit. So with B is for balanced. So then whenever I swing it back around, it's right there. Because I only move this up and down and side to side, A should technically not have moved at all. And I guess it did just a little bit, but that'll be fine. That's minimal. And that's it. There are so many different ways to do live edge bowls, so many different ways that, when you're turning a bowl the normal way around, you focus on balancing the grain. Here's a piece of the pith, here's the next part, and so you try to balance it out because you're looking for that X pattern in the middle. That means that whenever the wood shrinks as it dries, it's going to dry evenly and uniformly. This doesn't matter. You don't have to do all the nuance and all the technical information and stuff. This is, it looks good, so it is good. And there's something freeing about that. The other part is, so there is only the smallest amount of vibration in this because this part isn't trued up. This is out of round, but it's balanced. So you can spin it a whole lot faster. You're going to have interrupted cuts anyway. But because the wood is balanced, it turns like it's the right way to turn it. It turns like the wood is okay with what's going on. I know that's really a weird thing to, like, the wood is thinking also. Kind of makes it strange. But the point is, whenever you get it right, it really starts to feel right. And then you can start shaping it, which I'm about to do right now after a little bit of water. Also going to pass this around. As I'm starting to shape this, I have lost the Sharpie. Actually, let me do this one. This will show up a little bit better. Right now, I have very little room. I have about right there where bark isn't. So I can shape however I want, up to this line. I can remove material, I can set up the foot, and I'll do all that in just a second. Once I get to here, I have to stop. And then all of the finish cuts are in one single direction. I'm going to pass this around, but I'm going to try to show it first. This is a sample little piece that I did. There's nothing wrong with it, except when I went to go take the foot off, I apparently had cut it originally going uphill and then tried to shape it going downhill. I didn't know. It had been a while, so I didn't think about it. I sanded it. It was fine. I put the finish on it, and I got, can you see this incredibly distinct line that doesn't show up until you put the finish on it, until you're done with it, until you're ready to show it off, and then suddenly you're not ready to show it off. So I'm going to pass this around. This feels finished. It doesn't feel like there's any difference in the cut. But this is why we're going to do full push cuts, because we want to keep the bark on, so we're doing push cuts, and you're not going to be able to start and stop and go different directions with it. There is that same one that has 3 high points and a little stand on it. Some of the black dye for the stand actually bled onto the underside of the piece. And originally when I cut it, I had gone one way and come the other, and I sanded it out. I started at 60 grit, and I thought I had sanded it out. There is a small spot on there where you can see where the dye has gone up and then angled across because it didn't cross that line of where I changed the cut direction. So you won't be able to tell. It's going to show up in the finish, and it's going to be incredibly noticeable to at least just you. Okay. So every push cut, or every finish cut, is going to be from the bark in. And what I'm going to do now is, yes, it's balanced, but this is still at an angle. Now that I have it where I want it, I'm going to trip the side, and I'm going to mark out where the tenon goes, because I just put all this work in to balance it. I want the tenon so that, worst case scenario, I can get the bowl back. If it decides to become a frisbee, it won't. And I hope not. And I'm just looking at you because you're in the line of fire for it. But that way, then I can set it up on a chuck, reverse it, and I haven't lost all the progress that I've made so far. So, any questions so far? I know I'm talking a lot, and I'm telling you like the spirit of the wood and how the tree will talk to you and all this weird stuff. Am I missing things? Am I just explaining it that well? Okay. All right. So pull cut is going to be the best way to remove a lot of material quickly. I'm actually going to take out this corner. That corner felt a little sharp, and so as long as I'm coming up to this do not cross line, and I didn't cross it, then it'll be okay. All right. So, marking out a tenon, I have a random, seemingly random question, if I can find it. Can anybody tell me why a carpenter's pencil is a rectangle? Why a carpenter's pencil is shaped like it is a rectangle?
So it fits down in my bandsaw groove.
Yes. Gee, how'd you know that? I made that the tip of the month in the newsletter this month, specifically to see who would pick up on that. What was that?
Somebody had a good tip this month in the newsletter.
Who knew there was an ulterior motive with it? This was market research, see who reads it. Okay, so with these, this is the one-way live center, this is the robust, and this is the Nova. They all have something in common. They're all 1 3/4 inches wide. This one's mine. This one is not. So, carpenter's pencil is 1/4 inch thick, 1/2 inch wide. What that means is if you sharpen this right at the center, then that is an 1/8 inch above cutting. So if I put this, which is 1 3/4, up and add it by an 1/8, I get 1 7/8, which is exactly what the chuck that I have, and now the chuck that Dennis has, that's the size that it takes to not leave marks in the wood and actually create a perfect circle. So without having to measure anything, without having to do math, I can just lay this here, mark it out, and I've got a perfect tenon already. Now, because this is green wood, I do want to give it a little bit extra room so that I can know that as you compress down on the chuck, the metal in the wood, the metal is going to squeeze some of the moisture out of the wood, and it can loosen up over time. I'm trusting each and every one of you to remind me at different points to retighten the chuck and make sure that it's set. Can we do that? Because I will forget. So, tenon's marked out, and it's going to be a little bit wider than it needs to be. The next step, I'm actually going to look at marking out the foot. I've been kind of in a phase lately about the foot design actually, like where you put the foot influences the entire design. I like, and this is kind of why this blank is good, I like the slow sweeping in design. I know a lot of them can end up being a little bit too flower pot shaped if I'm not careful, where I go in and then I have to cut in, but those geometric cuts don't look natural. So, I mean, they can, but for me, I'm going to prefer, I'm just going to eyeball it, where it looks like it would sweep here, and then as I'm looking at it, it looks like the foot would be somewhere around here. So I'm going to give, if this is the foot, I'm just going to give it some depth. So now where I've colored this in, this will be the entire foot. Now that I have all of the thinking out of the way, I can just get to turning. I'm going to make a tenon. I'm going to start shaping the outside of this. You've got all the layout lines that you need. So I'm going to go do that now. Any questions about the tenon, the foot, the anything?
Could you move the light just a second? Maybe get a picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, guys, there you go.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Look at that. That looks like it's about 3/8 from where I want the tenon to where the foot starts. That is very convenient. As I cut in, I'm going to try to make sure, because I don't want to establish the foot like where the foot is and then not give myself room to establish the tenon. So I'm just gonna eyeball this. I'm gonna try to put it back. But for right now, I'm just gonna keep forgetting about the feedback. I'm gonna remove material up to this same line to create the slope that I have in mind for it. And keeping in mind that it's balanced, I can actually start to bring the speed up a little bit. This is about 1100. As I get to more precise cuts, I'm going to switch to a smaller half-inch bowl gouge. But I've given myself enough room here so that as I'm removing material to establish where the foot's going to be, I haven't lost where I want, or to establish where the tenon's going to be, I haven't lost where I want the foot to be. This is one of those things where, what do you call them instead of changes? They're design opportunities. I still have a little bit of the pith down here, and that's not going to make for a very solid tenon because it's already got a little bit of it taken out. So I'm just going to go down a little bit further and make sure that I feel safe when with whatever tenon I end up with. At this point, even I'm thinking it, but you might be thinking that I'm getting shorter and shorter and shorter. No, I mean, yes, but there's no need to get the biggest bowl you can if you can get the best bowl you can. So right now, I'm going to have a safe tenon. I'm going to have a nice sweeping shallow curve like I like. It's going to end up looking much better than if I had just gone for as big of a piece as I could. Okay. So the next step, I'm going to use a spindle gouge just to true up, to take away some of this, true up the tenon, and true up the side. Again, just because this is the good thing to say every single time. This is just a spindle gouge and a spindle roughing gouge. Don't do that. So what we have there is a decently smooth tenon. Right now, this is the only thing that I'm actually going to check and make sure and due diligence, not just feel it out, because this is one of the safety things. This is one of the important things. I'm actually going to start shaping the. I was looking for the sharpened gouge. I'm actually going to start shaping the thing. There's one last little bit that I need to do, and I don't remember where I put. There it is. This is from Harbor Freight's $20 collection from whenever I first started turning. And all I did is I ground a dovetail pattern in on one side and then on the other, but it's flat. So I'm going to bring it in just as a scraper. And in the anticipation of taking tendon off later, I'm not really worried about a scraping finish against spalted wood. There's a lot of tear out. It's not a big deal. What does happen is it gives me a very crisp corner so that the chuck can hold onto it, and a flat face against here so that the chuck aligns it based on all the balancing work that we've done. I say we. I consider your moral support in that big because, like I said, I had to do math. With the rest of this, it's done. It's all up to shaping. It's just feeling it out. It's just looking at it whatever shape you want it to be, whatever shape the wood will allow itself to be shaped into. So I'm going to just start the shaping. Am I losing anybody so far? Is anybody falling asleep? I don't know. I don't actually know what time it is, so really, okay. I'm gonna finish shaping it out, and then we can take like 5-minute break, because. Okay. All right. Yeah. Just Okay. Nah, I have water, and as long as you don't mind hearing me drink through a microphone, it's always such a weird sound. So as I'm doing this, getting into a little bit better position, I'm going to start cutting, again, all push cuts all the way in, and I'm just going to go for a basic bowl shape. The idea behind the design being, if you took a perfect circle and cut it into thirds, the generic bowl shape should be the bottom third of that circle. So that's the easiest way to get that kind of shape, is imagining it as a bigger part of a circle. Right now I have the tool rest. I'm cutting all the way down to here, so you would think I would have it started out here, but I'm actually going to have it just about straight on, because the most important part is the push cut through the bark. So as I'm working on that, I want it to be in as stable and as balanced of a place as possible. And then once I get to the push cut, then I can keep going. If worst case scenario, I can come with a different cut, or pick up the cut and carry it through after I move the tool rest. But again, the bark is the most important part. With this cut, I'm going to be watching this ghost line up at the top to be able to see where my shape is. This whole time as I'm doing this, I'm just letting the tool do the work. My job is to find where on the bevel it's cutting, which is usually going to be just shy of the tip, just on the side of the wing, and do what I can to chase, keeping that part that's cutting consistently. That's how you end up with the full smooth curve without the bumps or the ridges. And as soon as I get a full cut past the bark, then I can do whatever, but I'm aiming to push as much as I can with this shape, with how the bark is, and it's actually not bad. So I'm going to shape the bead on the foot just a little bit. Problem solved. No, actually, that is a really big part of this. This is whenever I start with the hollowing the inside, actually. That's one of the secrets that has really helped me with this kind of interrupted turning. You have the light shining as bright as possible right on the part that you're cutting. You have the tool coming towards the wood. It casts a shadow on the wood. You don't necessarily know where you are with the ghost image. So to help align, whenever the shadow and the tool meet, you aim that point at the highest part of the wood, and you have an easy entry point every single time. So now with this foot, it's okay. It's tapered in so that as it starts, like I said, it's green. As it warps and dries, I'm actually gonna take off a little bit of the corner so that it dries better. It's not sitting on a flat surface, it'll be sitting on a tapered in surface towards the outside, so that as it warps, it'll still stand on at least 3 points on the outside, and it won't look like you accidentally let it warp. If it warps, it'll look intentional. Okay. So there's one secret weapon that has been hiding for all of this. We're going to go back to this final push, this final cut. Get things set up right. And the secret is in this tool, this little spindle gouge. Like I mentioned before, I have something with the Ellsworth grind, something with a English grind, the steep flute. The normal bowl gouges that I have are modified fingernails, because Ellsworth grind is really good at removing a lot of material quickly. The gouge that I use the most has the grind that I'm most comfortable with. This one is a conventional grind. It's right at 40 degrees. Can we do overhead for this? Because this is a fun part. This has very steep wings, and again, the corners, so you got to watch out for them. This is the biggest secret weapon that I have for any sort of live edge bowl. There's spalting in here. That means that the wood has already started to rot and it's already getting punky. That might trip me up a little bit. I would be surprised if after one pass with this, I had any torn grain cutting the wrong direction. This is unsupported grain. I'm supposed to get tear out, specifically here, which I have tons of, and here, where the way the grain is, this will be supported, but this won't. It'll tear out. And over here, and if you feel across here, it is very rough in those two spots. This fixes that. So with an interrupted turning, I'm going to go ahead and it should all be decently balanced. I'm going to go very fast and very slow at the same time. So the lathe speed will be higher, the feed rate will be slower, and this is a 1/4 inch gouge. I'm looking to take the smallest bit of a cut. There have been times where I've had tear out and I don't want to sand it, so I get this gouge, and then you don't have to, or at least you get to start at a higher grit. So with this one, I'm actually going to have the light back, because that part before where starting an interrupted cut, it's just going to be better if I have that shadow line to help me align where I'm looking. Who put that light there? Is it? Okay. Okay. So I have a few ridges from where the tool started bouncing. This is a smaller gouge, so it's going to have a much harder time with interrupted. These spalt lines are not wood, so they're going to bounce some. And over here, this is where it's starting to rot. This is the regular wood. So there's still tear out here. There is none here, except down here where I kind of stopped the cut and the light got in the way. And there's a little bit right here. So I'm going to do one more. I'm going to say the phrase. I'm just going to do one more cut. It's always the one, that's always this thing you say right before disaster. But this should be fine. I'm going to stop doing that. I have one little line right here. One little spot right there that I'm just try to get out. And actually, because it's down further past the bark, yeah, I can just start in the middle and pick up the cut. And with this one, I'm cutting at one point with the flute open, but I started getting too much bounce with it. So by switching it to a very sheer cut, this tool can cut either way and still leave a really good finish. It gives you the opportunity to, again, however the wood wants to be cut, that's how this shape of grind for the bowl gouge, it can be versatile. Now that is much better. There is going to be some sanding necessary because this is spalted wood and it's got some picked out grain that was already going to be loose. But otherwise, it's a finish that I'm really happy with. Not sure if anybody else can be happy with it if they can't see it. So the next step would be probably at this point to go ahead and sand. I'm not going to because, well, I don't have the sandpaper. But when you have the option to sand, don't power sand. I mean, you can technically. You can do a lot of different things. You can cut, you know, up towards the rim if you have very, very sharp tools. Will the bark stay on? Well, I mean, depending on how sharp your tools are, I can say 100% without a doubt, unequivocally, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, on that spalted wood, if you wanted to harden it up, would this be where you'd put some, I'm sorry, on that spalted wood, if you wanted to harden it up, would this be where you would put some CA glue on there and then let it dry and turn again?
Absolutely. So with spalted wood, it becomes a case by case for how punky it is. For how far the spalting has progressed. If it's really, really gone, you can even do, there's a product called cactus juice, and you can get a vacuum pump and stabilize it. You can go all the way to that extent. But if it's just very lightly spalted, then you can do shellac, dries really quickly. Then mineral oil to keep it wet. It'll help raise the fibers and swell it like water, but mineral oil doesn't dry. Water will dry over time, and so you might lose the cut as you're trying to take the final shapes. There's a product, I think it's still around. Have you all ever heard of electric shave? It's an old shaving thing that, yeah. It's that same kind of concept. It's the difference between a wet shave and a dry shave. So if you want these fibers to be able to stand up, then you have to give them something that will, I've heard of people using hairspray before for literally the same reason. I just think that that would get gummy, and after you try to sand it, it wouldn't work. So CA glue, yes, at that point it gets expensive. Shellac is cheap. It can go under just about any finish. So that's what I'll end up using, and generally that's if I have really tough interlocked grain, because then that'll help freeze it in place. But yeah, when it's spalted, it's, I mean, literally spalt by spalt basis. I'm gonna finish up, as I was cutting in, one of the wings got the foot, so I'm gonna touch that up real quick. And basically that's as much as I'm going to do on the outside. So then the next part, it gets reversed. Y'all have been good bearing with me throughout this whole thing. I know there's a lot of thought that goes into it. There's a lot of pre-planning compared to, at the end of the day, I mean, for this next section, it's really just, you're just turning a bowl. The grain is going to be running the same way that you would normally turn a bowl. The cuts to hollow it out are going to be the same as you would normally go. And I don't even need the set screw, but I'm just going to tighten it down a little bit. If you really want to, after all the different times that you've recentered it, you know what? I'm going to take this little nub part off. Whenever it's spalted, you're never really 100% sure where the strength in the fibers exists. So I would rather just take a little hacksaw rather than trying to, like you saw as I was starting to put taper on it, usually that can work, and then you get it down thin enough where it just flicks off like that. But with spalted wood, I'm not going to trust it. The same way that I would do a tenon instead of a mortise. If you open the, if you expand into a mortise, you're pushing on all those fibers. And if the fibers are already wanting to give way, they're already spongy, you're just going to give it more and more incentive to get loose, to fall off, to explode. All kinds of bad things. And that's actually running really true. Please, no one look at how surprised I am with myself. Okay, this is the part. I'm trusting all of you to remind me to tighten the chuck, since this is green wood, every once in a while. Okay, so before I go to this section, what are we thinking? How are we feeling? Because yeah, this is my home club. I know most of y'all, I like even more of y'all. I want to know what y'all are thinking, because this is I hate this phrase, but it's true. This is where I've been cutting my teeth for the last year, and I've learned so much. I mean, the whole point is I'm here for y'all, because I've started practicing this so that I could have the answers to whatever questions for people who've never turned one or slightly turned one or something. I mean, if there's anything that I'm missing, let me know, because this is This is more for me to, for y'all to learn rather than me to just tell you. So, how we feeling? We ready for the next section? We good? Okay. Okay. That being said, I have a secret. The one secret that I have that is the conventional bowl gouge to get a really nice finish all the way across. The second one is this, what used to be a Sawzall blade, reciprocating saw blade. I think it's less than a 1/16 of an inch. Thank you. This is now an ultra thin parting tool, and it is also an ultra useful parting tool. Before I start hollowing out anything else, I'm going to back up a little bit, and I'm going to give myself a relief cut right in the middle. It can be a little bit further over if you want, but just to start with, it's going to be right in the middle. Oh, that's actually really useful. Did the LED go out? Those things are only good for 10,000 hours.
All right. Wasted effort.
It was useful for while it was there. Okay. So the secret here is a relief cut. I'm going to make it. I'm going to do one full plunge all the way down to the depth until I hit solid wood. And then I'll explain why. Hopefully, I won't also show why, but because it's a little safety feature. I'm also going to wait until I'm not throwing shavings on Gerald's head. I don't know. When else would I get that opportunity?
There you go. Oops.
I'm not going to use the tailstock anymore if you want to set it up flat here.
Okay. You got it.
Perfect. Yeah. If it works for the camera, it's going to work for me. Okay, so I turn the speed all the way down because habit, like that's just always going to be a good thing. If you have a tool rest like this where it actually has the place for your hand as opposed to just a regular round bar, that's going to help you out a lot here. I'm trying to come up with some joke about how this bark is worse than its bite. Can't come up with one, but if it tags your hand while you're turning, you're going to feel it. And then worst of all, like you might get hurt, you might, you know, have some blood in the project, but worst of all, the bark might come off, and you've already worked all this way just to be able to not have it come off. So, very first part, relief cut. Because this is going to be an interrupted turning where I'm turning a lot of air, I'm also going to get it as fast as I can. Technically, it should be balanced. It's in a chuck, it's centered. It should be okay to have interrupted turning this fast. That is the secret trick. While I was practicing for this demo, there's a bowl over there that has a nice like layer of bark on it still, only because of this cut. As I start to hollow this, I'm going to start from the center, and I'm going to be hitting maybe this edge of the bark, maybe, you know, like curving around in the groove that I made. Who knows what's going to happen? You can start out with the flute closed and pivot in. But what you're doing is giving a little exit ramp for all the bark to strip, and then as it's going around, pull off. If anything else, you're going to want to start from this side where, you know, the technique where whenever you start a bowl, you start making little bowls and work your way out to the end. That's the one that you're going to want, because if you give it the exit ramp for the bark to come off, well, you're just targeting parts of the bark that have already come off. The big thing with this, though, is it's very easy to do kind of a pull cut or a pivot in because you immediately have bevel contact before you start cutting. The part here is as you're coming in here, the tool can very easily want to skate back if you don't have the perfect entry and it skates back. You can have perfect entry and then you open the flute to cut, but you don't really keep bevel contact and it skates back. I was a skateboarder for 10 years. I have never skated as much as I have when I was trying to learn how to enter a bowl. So what this does is if the bark flakes off, I'm not sure if I can find an easy piece to do this, it has a definite stop point. You know, with when people do like try to protect against wildfires, they'll actually burn the grass around. It's the same concept. You beat it to the punch. You can't cut past it because it's already been cut. So now the big trick is, will I demonstrate why that's important, or will I be able to open up the cuts all the way through? Gonna find out. Again, this is when it's super important to stop the lathe whenever you move the tool rest. Get it a little bit higher. I want it to be able to have the point cut right at center whenever I'm level. So that'll work. Chief, I may hit you with some bark. Actually, yeah, that'll be perfect. If this was SeaWorld, I think this area would be the splash zone. So just as I'm hollowing out, just let me know if I need to stop. We also have the big window if you want to, I don't know. This SeaWorld analogy is working because then that's going to make me feel like I'm in a fish tank. So, all right, I'm just going to keep going with this. What was that? Looking at all y'all. That's my dad. He remembered. Yep. Thanks, Dad. Always looking out for me. So this entry cut, I'm going to have all the echo. I'm going to start with the flute closed just until I make contact, and I'm going to start low to make sure I'm on the bevel. Once I can feel that I'm going into the bark, I can open the flute slightly, and that's what starts the cut. And I'll just chase it all the way down to the center. Start with the closed. By the time I'm done, I'm pretty close to open flute.
Good.
Okay.
You missed.
I'm just checking. I wasn't going for distance with that. Okay, so actually, I made it all the way through. When you go with the rim thickness, so the rule is for greenwood, you usually want the wall thickness 10% of the total diameter of the piece. The whole science behind that is most of the stuff is going to shrink more one way than it is the next, but the general rule of thumb is it's not going to be more than 10%. It's usually going to be in the 7 to 9%, so if you leave 10%, you'll be safe with any kind of wood based on however it warps. With this, it's going to be a greenwood bowl. I'm going to be okay with it warping. It can do what it wants. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it thin, but it's not going to be too thin. I kept all this bark on the whole way through. I want to show it off. So I'm going to go for 3/8, maybe a 1/2 inch. And then the wall thickness all the way through doesn't have to be even. It would be nice if it was even because that'll help with the drying process and everything. But as I'm sweeping through, there's like, it doesn't have to be completely boxed. It can flow a little bit more so that you don't end up with a flat spot at the bottom of the bowl. So I'm going to go ahead, now that I've worked my way up to this relief cut, I'm going to make another one. And this one is going to be angled a little bit.
Hey, Clayton,
Yes, sir.
could you not have done that cut the first time? Was there a reason you do it twice?
The first one is safety, if or not like personal safety, but preserving the bark. If I skated, I still have room. If worst case scenario, I ended up bouncing off the tool rest or doing something, I can I have all this meat left so that I can actually take the bowl down if for some reason I pulled the bark off the edge. At this point, the bark, I mean, it looks like it's staying where it is, but sometimes it can peel from the outside. As you're cutting on the inside, if you knock it or something, that can be the final thing that cuts it loose. So for right now, I'm establishing my final thickness, and with a lot of this bark, it really doesn't want to come off, which is lucky. I missed a little part. But the main reason is the first one, it's kind of the same reason I'm about to make a tenon inside the bowl, just in case I need to remount it, in case I need to do whatever. So it's a versatility. You what? Thanks, Dad. All right, chuck's tightened, relief cut is mostly there. All right, as I'm hollowing this in, I'm just gonna go down to this little middle part. I'm going to, as much as I can, I'm not gonna move the rest. I may actually grab, I have this 3/8 Badan, it's gonna be useful. I can get some overhang with it, and actually can make it a mortise, because I don't want it to be a mortise, but with where it is, it's going to be the easiest cut, and I just need something for in case I need to remount it or something. But so far, this bowl's been handling really well. I'm getting closer. As I'm coming in to the piece and actually getting into the full wood, you want that entry cut to go all the way through. There's not a specific, oh, this is the way the wood likes to be cut. It just, if you have to sand up here because you have those stepped cuts, it's just the worst. It's gonna ruin your day. So, clean cut all the way through, because again, this is how, as much as you cut uphill for the outside, you cut downhill for the inside. So these are actually already clean cuts. If I were to sand it, this is when I would sand the outside, because right now there's all this mass still left on the inside, so the chances that this is going to want to flex, very, very small. The more that I take this out, the less wood is actually holding on to it at that point. I have one more thing to mention, but for the rest of this, I'm just going to keep going with cleaning out this. I don't know if you can feel like the vibrations in the floor, but this is as much as I've been turning it. This is actually faster than I've been turning it this whole time. Because I've taken away, there's only so little of the different eccentricity, it's way more balanced now. It feels balanced, you can get the finished cuts, it just feels right. It's fine. I told myself I was gonna check it every single time that somebody mentioned it. I was expecting no one to mention it. I was expecting to do it maybe 1 or 2 times, but thank you for caring about my safety. Okay. The last little bit of pretty much all of this. At this point, I have a 45-ish degree grind on here, so if I try to come all the way through, eventually there's the risk that I'm going to hit the bark. Again, the whole point of today, not to hit that bark. So what I'm going to switch to, actually I still need this. This is also a 1/2-inch bowl gouge, but with the close to the same 40-degree grind, except I can get the right picture of it. This has a bevel of 85 degrees. It is almost a complete right angle. You sharpen it like a normal bowl gouge, and then you come up to it, and you just roll it on the tool rest, almost like a spindle rough and gouge, or a very it's just a very steep conventional gouge. You can go just about at a right angle, and if you sweep with it, it gets the best tear out free smooth interior cuts. You know, like the large platters that have the small bowl on the inside, I can just go one pass and it's perfectly clean. So now that I've talked it up all big, let's see if I can clear out the bottom of this with being able to do that. And I'm going to show one more thing. 90% of the time, you're going to see somebody go, why don't you move the tool rest in? Like this. It's not going to hit the bark or anything, and then, you know, you're going to be... If this is a 45-degree grind, by the time I'm here, it doesn't matter where this is, I'm still on the tool rest way out here. Except now I'm at a shear angle so I can slide off at any given point. So that's why when hollowing it, I stay it all the way through with it perpendicular. Now that I'm switching bowl gouges, make sure I don't hit the high spot. Now I can come in a little bit more because the overhang is, it's almost in a scraper direction, but it's cutting. I'm going to check the wall thickness with, like I said, we're not doing measurement today, so I'm just going to use digital calipers. And it's even all the way through up until I get to where I need to take this mass out. But then the depth also seems good. So I'm going to start taking these little passes. Now that I'm down past the bark, I don't have to worry about it anymore. I can just treat it like a normal bowl. I don't know if you've noticed, but every time I've switched to a different cut, I've actually switched to a different gouge, very specifically because it's sharp. That's going to be one of the big things, is as counterintuitive counterintuitive as it sounds, the sharper it is, the less friction you're going to get from the cut. So the sharper the tool, the safer the cut. Now that I've come all the way through, I'm just going to take one last arcing pass, not moving the tool forward or back, so that way I get a perfect pivot all the way through. So I want my final depth to be right about there. So I start out here and then just pivot in. Can the camera see the little white dot that's at the center of this? There's no point to it, it just, this bolting looked neat. Okay, so right at where the corner is, there's a little bit of a corner. So I'm gonna try to get that out, and then it'll be smooth enough. Okay. I've got a few ridges in here that I'm not really going to be worried about. I'm going to get one last pass down at the bottom here, and then I think we're going to have a lab edge bowl. Still just a little bit. And thankfully, because I decided that this is going to be a thicker walled piece, there's not really the concern of funneling it. Okay. So there's a little ridge down at the bottom, but I'm not going to worry about it because this is lab edge bolt. And pass that around, and that's really the start. It is as basic of a bowl as it can be, and it's what? Good job. Oh, thank you. It's basic. It's still going to be impressive. People who haven't seen a live edge bowl before. Who's seen Cindy Drozda's waterfall bowl? The big flowing burl that looks like it's like actually flowing down. That's a live edge burl, or a natural edge burl, upside down. Once you start to build on different things, you can get some really impressive different options. Now, I'm not saying the options over there are impressive, but they are different. So from here, you can take a bunch of different steps with it and start adding it, start doing different things. It becomes creative. You get connected to whatever you're working with, and because it's a team up with the wood, you end up really impressing yourself because, oh, I didn't know I could do that. Well, there's a team up, and you can do way more than you expect. All right, well, thank you. Yeah. Actually just made one. I've tried it, it works kind of well. This is the Mike Hunter carbides. So they're cupped, which means that they actually cut rather than scrape. That's really the only way that you're going to be able to do that and keep the bark on. This one I just made myself, just steel rod and tapped it with a metric thread. It works surprisingly well, especially for that sweeped cut. But if you use like easy wood tools and stuff, it's a gamble every time. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying there's going to be sanding involved in the future.
Hey Clayton, is it better to use dry wood or green wood for the natural edge or live edge?
It almost doesn't matter. Green wood is going to give you a lot easier cuts. Like the cuts that I made in that were easy to just push through and take big heavy cuts. The dry wood, if the bark is going to stay on, that means it has stayed long enough to season, so the bark is going to stay on. It just might be at that point, once it's fully dry, it might be more difficult to sand or get a clean cut. So it becomes a question of how much time investment you want in it. Green wood turns really quickly.
When you finish it, do you do anything extra special about the bark, or you just go ahead and put on your poly or whatever all around and be happy?
So I've been playing around with that. I have just deft spray lacquer for a lot of it. If I'm going to buff it, slower wheel than normal, like slower wheel speed than normal for buffing, because you don't want it to pick up any part of the bark. But lacquer for a gloss finish, and then you can really put on any kind of finish you want with a good, fine, like not rough, like just paintbrush, and just brush it on. You'll have to do really thin coats though, because then you won't be able to wipe it off after.
What if some bark does come off? It's kind of a loss.
I want you to explain that.
Okay, yeah, perfect. So this is my practice bowl. You can tell because it says Happy Mother's Day. This was my insurance in case today's bowl didn't work out, because today's bowl is the Mother's Day present so Happy Mother's Day, here's a funnel. I needed a backup. This one didn't have the bark on it whenever I first milled it up. So what you do is you hit it with a blowtorch. This one was just a creme brulee torch, and I did not seal it well enough. But then you brush away the ash. So the bark stays on. It's a great day. It's exactly what you wanted. The bark doesn't stay on. It's still a great day. You get to light something on fire. Yeah.
There you go.
Use this so Gerald will get on to me. The late great Tommy James said he never cut natural edge without a lot of CA glue on the bark. To answer your dad's question, sitting it between the bark and the real wood. And we had one piece that he was doing that I'm not sure if the bark came from a different tree or not. He just glued the stuff back on. But it seems like it's easier to keep the bark when it's green and the bark is still more attached to that cambium layer.
I just
if you
learned
let
this.
it dry, you're more likely to have it splinter off and everything. But a good investment in CA glue is usually worthwhile.
Yes. So I just learned this part. The bark staying on when it's green actually has to do with the season when it's milled. If it's milled in the winter, it's much, like you have a much stronger chance of it staying on. But if it only partially stays on, so speaking of Tommy James, as a beneficiary of the Tommy James Memorial Scholarship for SWAT, which thank you all, because that is all because of you guys, that I was able to go to SWAT last year. And I met Joe. Joe is really nice. The Hyun family, I'm not going to say that right, runs Starbond. And so he spent time explaining it to me. They came out maybe about a year or 2 years ago with a medium thick CA that is in brown. So there's the black, and you can fill it in if they're spalting lines. And I know, where's Kevin? You did the silver maple vase where it had a crack in it, but because it was spalted, you put the black CA glue in, can't tell. This one, so that pedestal bowl that I keep referring to, the one where the black CA is, yes, that one. That one has had the bark glued on 4 times. 2 times because I was nervous about it, and 3 times, or the 3rd and 4th time was, well, I was right to be nervous about it. But you can't tell, except for where I sanded it, and it looks like normal CA glue whenever you sand it, where it has a bloom to it. This stuff blends in phenomenally. It's not any more expensive than the black or the thin CA glue, and it hides it. It is the best Turner's Little Helper for doing any of that. What is that? So this is Starbond. This is medium thick, but it's in brown. So
Different colors, brown, black, whatnot.
pretty much, yeah. For a while, they had the Model T rule. You could have any color you want as long as it's black. A couple years ago, they added in brown, and they had it in a thin and a thick, but they found the thin would actually bleed through. So now it's just a medium thick that it doesn't bleed through. And then this is, I've been watching videos, I haven't found anybody else who like will mention this. They say you put the super glue on, you wipe it off real quick. I have never had that work. There's the crown bowl that has the big exclamation point finial that I put in the newsletter. There is a spot on it where you can see where the pith was. I put super glue. I put it on, I wiped it off immediately. It still left a mark that is still there right now. If you cover this with shellac, some kind of sanding sealer, some kind of something that will take the place of the gaps in the fibers, the super glue won't seep in. That'll help protect. So if you fill the pores and then put the glue on and wipe it off, it doesn't have, you basically have a bouncer at the door, so it can't get in the fibers and then stain, and then it looks like you had to glue it back on. It's a neat little, cheap little trick. So, and yes, this is I was prepared in case the bark kind of came off.
Any other questions?
Cool. Thank you. Thank you all.